Hey, everybody, back with Student Connection. Glad you chose to join us. And as always, I hope this is helpful for you and your family. If you have topics that you would like to look at or questions, please feel free to contact me. You can email me at don@dabconline.org. And that's just an easy way you can send it out. Hey, you mentioned this. Can you go more in depth on it? Or, hey, I struggle with this. Can we kind of look at this, see what the Bible says? Love to be able to do that, but feel free to reach out to me any way you have, and we'll start looking at that. But today we're going to continue in what we started last week with looking at communication. And yes, this is kind of geared toward parents and students, but it's something that as believers, being able to communicate well is good for us because we are here to communicate the gospel. That's our number one goal while on earth as believers, to communicate the gospel. And if we do that well to people who need it, the lost, and granted, believers need to hear the gospel too. It's good for us. Paul talks about that in Philippians 3, that it's good that we continually hear this. So, but being able to communicate it well with those who've never heard it, those who've never surrendered to Christ, to be able to communicate it well with each other for encouragement, to build each other up. And whether it's within your own household, within the church, the local church that you're a part of, or whether it's between colleagues that they may not know Christ. So communication is important, and it's something that we do every day, just like this. I'm communicating through this medium right here of a video. So it's important, and I'm not always the best communicator. I'm going to own up to that. I tend to overthink things and draw things out way longer than they have to be, and more complicated than they have to be. But today, we're going to kind of pick up, and this one goes right along with the first one. Last week, we started communication, and we talked about expectations and the expectations that parents have for the relationship, last week we talked about establishing the relationship and the importance of parents and students. And the same way, it's important for us to establish a relationship with anybody that God puts in our path. We should be able to establish a relationship for the number one cause of the gospel. And not only to establish it, but have clear, in that establishment, clear standards, clear rules of where we are. I'm just going to use the example of parent and child because that's kind of where we're geared. But as parents, we have rules, we have standards that we desire for our children to live by. Whether it's like one I grew up with, and you can ask my kids and they get tired of hearing me saying it. When you leave the room and you're done in that room, you turn the light switch off. That's a simple one. That's a simple standard, simple rule I have. But I still find myself walking down the hall, reaching in every door and turning off every light on the way out. So it's something I try to remind them of. When you leave the room, you're done, hit the light switch. It takes half a second. But that's a standard I have. And there's other we have a standard. We strive to pray as a family every night. We strive to do family devotion most night. But I say but I said it twice. There are times where we walk in the door at 10 p.m. from something, and we rush to get our kids bathed and everything like that. But we make a point where we want to pray together. And I believe it was Tim Keller that said throughout the years with his kids that they strive to do things together, have family devotion together. But there were some nights that they just prayed, and he said as he got older, his kids would come back to him and said that's what they remember most, of praying with their family. So that's what we try to do, and that's a standard we've set of that we at least pray together every night. But we strive to do family devotion most of the week if we can. So that's some things in our house. But which also you have standards of, hey, respect elders, or say yes ma'am, yes sir, no ma'am, no sir, to adults. Standard little things we built in to our family, and each family is different. So understand that you're going to have different expectations. Than maybe I do, or maybe your parents did. So that's okay. You have to figure out what's works best for you as you point your children to Jesus, as you point them to being adults and growing up and being a functioning part of the world that we're in. And in that, I think we model communication for them, and our tone, our the words we say. And the older I get, I'm made more aware of that and more aware of how it affects my children. But once we establish that relationship and they know where we are standing on, then we know where to go. Then we can lead into those expectations. And these last week and this week are kind of tied together because our expectations are built on the standard that we set. Again, my buddy CJ, I mentioned last week, it sent this one to me, and when I asked several friends for their input, their advice. And this is his exact words. He says, "You should do for your kids what you expect of them. For example, I don't know that my parents or many parents ever really apologized to me in ways they'd expected me to if I acted wrongly. I think it's a pretty strong statement when a parent chooses to apologize to their kid." Those are CJ's words, and I agree. I agree with that. That's one thing that, for me personally, I've tried to do. If I mess up and I catch myself, I go to, if it's one of my children, I go to them and we have that conversation, and I say, "Listen, I was wrong in this, and I apologize for it." And I just want to be upfront with them. And they still may not like that. They still may struggle through that, but I want them to know where I am. And if it's to all my children, I'll do it in front of all of them. That's one thing for me as a parent. I've tried to do quickly. I've thought through. Yes, I was wrong in this. I need to go to them, and I will. And so for me, I've strived to do that. But one thing I've learned is this: if we aren't parents, if we aren't taking it to heart, it's going to lose its value over a period of time. So if we're striving to do it and set that example for our children, to say, "Hey, these are the expectations. If you do something wrong, you need to go to that person. Well, if I do something wrong, I need to go to that person. If I say something that was mean or hurtful, I need to go and apologize to them. I need to set that example. I've set the standard, and I'm telling you what the expectations are, but I need to lead in that example." And not only just in the example CJ gave of being apologetic towards something, but in everything. In everything. If we are desiring for our children to grow in the Lord and to be in His Word, we need to be in His Word. We need to be in His Word. There are some days that it's easier for me to get here to my office and close the door and be in the Word here than it is for me to sit at home and do it. And then there's other times, for instance, last night I was able to sit and read and spend time with the Lord and pray, and it was great after my kids had gone to bed. So we have to find that time, but we also need to model it. And this is the big thing, and this fits right in with communication. We need to talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about our relationship with the Lord to our children. Let them hear it from our mouths. Let them hear it from our mouths. A friend of mine was telling me just last week that talking about pouring into his children, and he said, when I pass, he said, I want my kids to be able to talk about the things I like. Yeah, they were a Cowboys fan, or they like this or that, but the first thing out of their mouth was they love Jesus, and they came to know Him at such and such a date, and this is how it happened. And I'm like, man, that's so good. I want my kids to know my testimony, to where when God calls me home, that they have no doubt of when I came to know the Lord and how. And so it's up to me, just me, to relay that to them. And so that's probably one of the biggest parts of communication, and a standard we can set is, hey, we're going to talk about the Lord and in the good and the bad and what we struggle with. And I find myself having those conversations with my children as we're driving down the road. and say, hey, this happened and this happened, and I said, man, it might stink that this happened. It's a bad thing happened to me or to us, but God is still good. And think about the way he's been faithful. We need to set that example in how we communicate things to our children and how we ultimately communicate them to people around us, because God has given us a platform no matter where we are. As I tell students all the time, God has you planted where you are for a reason, and that reason is to fulfill his purpose in taking the gospel out, and he is glorified with that. And that's why we're here, to bring glory to the King. So I pray that we can do it this week.